This is a 2001 Suzuki Grand Vitara XL7, and we are going to be doing a 4-inch lift kit. And I'm just going to do a quick walk around to show you what this looks like factory. It does have broken coil springs in the front and the back, so it is sitting a little bit lower than factory right now. Here's the 4.5-inch lift kit package that came for Ed, and I've got to figure out how to get all of that stuff, springs, control arms, trailing arms, spacers, and front hub differential modification done on this Suzuki Vitara. And I'm not real impressed with the instructions. It's kind of just worded with no pictures or anything, so you kind of just looking at this stuff, you're like guessing. So I'm thinking as I start taking this apart, I'll just figure out where the parts go. I did call them and talk to them about the front differential because there's some parts that showed up that I wasn't sure what they were for. Like this part here. Apparently that's going to go inside the differential, and it is a modification for the differential because there's a vacuum actuator assembly in there that locks the four-wheel drive. And then they give you locking hubs so that you can unlock them so your axle assemblies aren't turning all the time. And there's also this spacer with a new seal that goes in the passenger side. Okay, so we got to drop the differential, and because we're removing all the suspension components and replacing them with upgraded components that are going to support the 4-inch lift, you might as well start with removing the axle. So you got to take that hub assembly off there first. In order to get the axle out, you're going to have to remove that snap ring there, and then the axle will slide out of the assembly. And as for the rest of it, it's just the wheel bearing adjuster so that they can adjust the torque on the wheel bearing and the wheel bearing play. But you're just taking the snap ring off and sliding the axle out. The snap ring removed, you'll see it moves easy just like that. And the next thing you got to do is take the brake caliper off. Don't forget to remove this clip because you want the brake line to have some movement so that you can put the caliper up there. And you want to remove this bolt that's holding the wheel speed sensor so that this whole assembly can hang down and you won't have to remove it. Also remove that clip there. It'll give you some more room on your wire so you're not pulling on the wire when the spindle assembly is hanging in the air off of the tie rod end. Next up, you got to remove these strut bolts here, both of them, and then you'll be able to remove the spindle assembly. And then you also have to remove the lower control arm ball joint nut. Well, it looks like this axle doesn't want to come out, and I just noticed that there's some bolts here you can remove to take the axle off right there, and then it'll slip out. You can just drop that down, it'll pull right out. And there you have it. It's all removed. So now what you do is you work on the sway bar. You remove that sway bar, and that swing arm should come down, or control arm, and that spring will come out. And there's already very little tension on that spring, so it shouldn't be too much of a worry. Sway bar is removed, and now you can move this control arm. And you can see how the spring is just barely sitting there. And there it is. It's on the floor. Now it's time to remove the control arm. Also, you got to do all this stuff on the other side. Okay, so I'm having some problems with that control arm. This is my makeshift effort to try and push that bolt through that sleeve because it's rusted in that bushing sleeve. And it doesn't want to budge. So because I'm not using this control arm and we're going with upgraded ones, I'm just going to have to cut this thing off. I'm going to try and zip disc it on this side, flip it the other way, zip disc it on the other side, pound it off, and then I'm going to cut through the bushing and cut through that sleeve with a zip disc and try to separate that sleeve from that bolt because I do have to reuse this bolt. Or the other option is to just cut the bolts off and zip it on both sides and pull it out and go get a new bolt. That's another option, but I'm going to try to save the bolt. Okay, so I managed to get the left-hand control arm out no problem, but the one on the passenger side I actually had to cut. I'll just show you here. Sometimes that's what you got to deal with when you're dealing with old vehicles. You just can't push them out, whether you have an air hammer or some kind of a press or a porta power, it doesn't matter. They're just rusted in so bad that you have to cut them out. Okay, so now it's time to remove the diff. You're going to have to remove that bolt right up there, and you're going to have to remove that bolt right up there, right in there, and you're going to have to remove that bolt there, and there's two bolts to remove that bracket. You're going to have to remove that to slide the diff out. and then you'll be able to drop the diff. And these brackets up here are going to get replaced because these are going to drop the diff on the front and it's going to tilt it forward, is what I was told over the phone when I talked to these guys at Zukination. All right, those bolts are out. Now this diff should come down. Okay, once you have the diff out, the next step is to remove all of these bolts and pull this pinion carrier out of the differential, and then start your modification. I forgot to mention, you got to pull this axle out before you take that pinion carrier out. So what I like to do is I take a big long pry bar like that, and I put it against the back of the flange like that, and then I smack the end of it with a hammer, and then it starts coming out. And I've already done it a few times, and it's come out that far. Just wanted to give a demonstration of how this thing works. I seen a guy in a video say that it was vacuum that actuated this thing. It's actually positive pressure. So I'm going to supply a little bit of positive pressure and you'll see it move. See, look at that. And that's how it works. And then it locks the... I'm not sure what it locks. It locks something, and then it makes the diff connect with the pinion, and then the axles will lock, and it still acts as an open diff. It's not a locker, it's just engaging the front differential. The downside to this system is you're still spinning your axles all the time, and that's why this kit gives you a locking hub assembly, so that your axles aren't always turning. So when you want to use four-wheel drive, you'll have to get out and lock your hubs, but you know what? It saves on wear and tear on the vehicle. So the next thing you want to do is get your puller out and pull that bearing off of the pumpkin. Now you remove the vacuum actuator, or the pressure actuator. That's a little piston that pushes on this assembly here, and you replace it with that ring. Okay, so your kit should have come with one of these sleeve things. I talked to the people at Zukination, and they say that I was supposed to remove that pressure thing that activates the four-wheel drive, and the four-wheel drive thing, it pushes down on that thing and then it splines. So what this thing does is you replace that that pressure piston, air pressure piston, with this thing, and then you press the bearing back on, and now that makes this locked all the time, and this will no longer work with the factory air pump that's in the vehicle. So you just plug that thing off, is what they told me to do. That way the four-wheel drive light won't come on. Okay, so I got that ring installed, and it's as far down as it's going to go. I've pressed the bearing on, and it's bottoming out. There's still a little bit of play in this disc here. I don't know if that's by design or not, but it is locked. I tried moving it, and the differential is locked, so it won't free spin anymore. Okay, so this is the vent tube for the four-wheel drive actuation. And there's really nothing in the instructions about this. So what I'm going to do is I just welded the tube shut on both ends. And I'm going to reinstall it in the diff, and I'm going to hook the line to it so that the pump has something to push against, so that the four-wheel drive light doesn't come on. And it won't leak any oil. Okay, so this kit comes with these two pieces here, and it's to support the passenger side axle, because I guess factory they don't have this little plastic bushing. And I guess it causes problems with the lift because of the angle that these axles are going to be at, and probably causes oil seal leak issues. But it looks like it's already been done to this vehicle, so I am going to just not install the new one and just leave the one that's already installed in there. Okay, so in your kit you're going to get these two pieces, and if you're not sure where they actually go on the differential. They're going to go one on that side and one on that side, and I'll show you what it looks like when they're installed. Okay, for the diff bushings, all the bushings they give you in this kit are part number 2130, so they're all the same, and they just slip in like this, like that. They give you these pins, a bunch of pins, and you got to figure out which ones go where. They mark these ones drop or down or something like that. I'm not sure what the writing means, but I checked it with the front diff mounts, and it actually fits in there nicely, and the bolt goes through it nicely. And these are the only ones of this length, and they're the ones that fit inside of where this part here bolts up into the vehicle, and it's these sleeves fit into place. So that sleeve will just go in like that, and you press it in by hand, and I can't do that holding the camera. Okay, so when I bolted down this bracket on the passenger side, I put 3 washers on the bottom because it doesn't have holes that go all the way through. They bottom out, and I wasn't sure that the bolts are going to be, well, I think the bolts are too long because the bracket, the factory bracket, it's a bit thicker than the aftermarket one. So I put washers on it just to make sure that I didn't bottom out and split the case. And on the top, it doesn't matter because they go right through, so you can just run them right in. And you can see that the threads are a little bit longer and they actually go right through now. So for an update, I put these brackets on prematurely. I was reading their instructions, and I guess you're supposed to put them in the vehicle first, and it'll help you get the differential in the vehicle. Also, you have to clearance this rib right here, I guess. This is the one they're talking about. This is the lower rib, and you got to grind that out and make it flush, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done.